Right, we have got a short but packed morning, and we are going to start off by hearing about health and well-being. Our guest speaker is the Director of the National Wellbeing Service, Andy Rhodes, OBE QPM. And Andy comes with a rich history, as many of you know. He's the former Chief Constable of Lancashire Police, and in 2015 he established the first National Police Wellbeing Service, Oscar Kilo. He helped construct the Home Office ONS Frontline Review Survey in 2018, which then established a national wellbeing for all 43 forces in England and Wales. He has been instrumental in the development of the Police Covenant for England and Wales, and in the 2022 birthday honours, he was awarded an OBE, I nearly upgraded them, OBE for services to emergency services workers' mental health. His talk is called "We Asked for Workers and They Sent Us Humans." So would you please give a very warm welcome to the Director of the National Wellbeing Service, Andy Rhodes.
Thank you. And when Nick gave me this slot, I think it was deliberate that the wellbeing chap came in at this time and the conference agenda. So thanks very much for all of you who made it here today. And it is getting live streamed as well. One of the things that we try to do in the National Police Wellbeing Service, we're quite a small national capability, and we try to get out and about to forces and support them as much as possible. But one of the things that we generally try to do is not just present a problem or a challenge. We try to help forces and individuals, for that matter, find a solution to it as well. And so I'm going to talk through what I think is a big issue. There are a lot of determined people applying themselves to this issue at the moment, and that is future workforce planning. But to understand where we're going in the future, what we've got to do is look at the journey that we've come to get here today. And so the title of my presentation is Part 2, because I used this before actually, and I really like it because I read it somewhere and I've used it for several years, because workplace health has got such a key part to play in everything that we do around policing, as in every organisation. It's a big bottom line driver of performance, cost, whatever it might be. But when it comes to policing and other emergency service work for that matter, the nature of the work requires us to really ramp our game up and step our game up even more than most organisations. And so that's why it's important for us to come to conferences like this, to get involved in things like strategic workforce planning, because we've got really good information, insights, data, and I'm going to talk through some of that really do help us understand the problem. So I think if we go back to 2011, so how many people, everybody in this room will have been in policing in 2011, right? How many of you in this room were involved in any of the change work to do with austerity measures, where we did shrink our organisation significantly? How many of you were involved in that, either as a departmental head or managing change? It was a tough time, wasn't it? You know, I remember in my force, we went from sort of police officer numbers, something like 3,900 down to 3,100. You know, and taking out that amount of police officers and many police staff as well was very difficult. We've then, you know, we've gone through a new governance arrangements with PCCs. We've had COVID in the middle of it, and then we've had the uplift to put some of those numbers back in. So there's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge in the last 10 years, and it's sometimes quite difficult to unpick everything that's happened and understand why some of the things are happening around our workforce at the moment that are happening, and therefore understand what we should do about it. And it's simple. Sometimes it's quite easy to hang your hat on one simple thing, one single element of what's happened over the last few years, whether it be degrees, whether it be Gen Z, we've just been talking about that, or whatever. So I'm going to try and unpick that in my presentation. And I've looked at 5 key issues, hot topics really. Turnover experience, legal position in terms of some of the more unique aspects of the work that we do and where we sit legally with some of that, because one of our jobs in Oscar Kilo is to support employers to get it right, and we do pay a lot of attention to duty of care. Deployability, which actually is a new word but does exist. It is actually in the dictionary. and there was a lot of work done in the last 12 months around restricted justice, etc. And then expectations, whether that be externally on policing or internally from our workforce. But I'm going to open up with a poll question. I'm going to move through the presentation and cover all these 5 areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about the police covenant and then show you a montage of 3 of our short films that we do that thousands and thousands of officers and staff watch, covering different career points and some of the challenges that people face. We do those videos with an award-winning documentary maker called Chris Godwin, and they get massive reach across policing. I'm going to do a montage of those. But before we get there, we're going to do a poll question on your app. And Vanessa's going to help me with this one. The question is, how concerned are you that the workforce is resilient enough to cope with the challenges of policing heading into the future? So how concerned are you about the resilience of the police workforce to meet the challenges of the next decade? And that's the poll. If you could answer that one now, please. 1 not being not concerned at all, 5 being very, very concerned. When we finish this poll, I'm going to just touch on resilience as an issue because it's quite a complex area of work in terms of organisational development in itself, which many of you will be aware of. Just shout out a number if you haven't managed to get onto the app. How's that, Vanessa? Is that... Okay. Just while people are answering the app, how many people will actually still be in policing in a decade's time? Yeah, yeah. Feel for you. It is because sometimes when you start talking about 5 or 10 years ahead, particularly when you're doing senior leadership events, it's quite obvious that many of the people who are in the room will not actually be in policing when that point in time arrives. And I think that's why it's important that we do spend time to focus on planning for the future, even if we're not going to be here, so to speak, to deal with the issues, because we're all going to be members of the public, aren't we? So is that able to be put up in terms of the results, Vanessa, now? I mean, I'm looking at 4.3. So everybody's somewhere between extremely concerned and very concerned. And in terms of resilience, you should be concerned, because I think quite often when we talk about personal resilience, and this has happened over the years when we've been talking about workplace health, there is a mindset of, look, the job isn't going to change, it is what it is, we just need more resilient people than we're currently getting. And if you're not resilient enough to deal with the type of work that we do, then this isn't the job for you. And there is some truth in that. You know, personal resilience is something that you bring with you into whatever career and profession that you decide to go into. And it's a complex mix of your early life experiences and lots of other things that go in your life. However, one of the things that I think police suffers from is this idea that because the work is difficult, then that's not going to change, and therefore it's all about the individual becoming more resilient. And that is not the case, because when we look at the data and the research, overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly, and we did a massive national survey trawl of all staff association surveys, yours included, Fed surveys, Unison surveys, our survey. And what it told us was that it's organisational stresses that are affecting people's resilience predominantly. The work itself is difficult, that raises the bar, the cup is very full, so some of these organisational stresses are the ones that really do tip people over. And I'm going to cover some of that as I move through the presentation because they're all contained in these 5 hot topics. So I'm going to talk about turnover, experience, the law, deployability and expectations. Let's get into turnover first. So who's concerned about turnover at the moment, at whatever level in the organisation it is? Who's concerned about it? Show of hands. Yeah? Yeah. And when we look at how much turnover we have, there is an issue at the moment in terms of myths, facts and assumptions that we have got more people leaving than we've ever had leaving before. And it's true to say that previously, prior to, say, post-COVID and the uplift, our normal turnover rate in policing was 3%. That is basically people retiring. It's doing 30 years and then retiring. That was an annual retirement rate as much as it was a turnover rate. Lots of things have changed since then, as we know, and we have got a new generation of people joining policing. So what we're seeing now is more people leaving within the first 5 years of service than previously used to leave. Yeah. Now, I would suggest that I'm not sure that's a problem. I don't think we fully understand it enough yet, because some of the people that I worked with when I first joined, quite honestly, were not cut out to be in policing, but stayed for 30 years. And sometimes there is a healthy turnover rate, where people, if they've come into an occupation, a profession, and it's not for them, and that is not something that they should be ashamed of. Yeah, we should value the fact that they thought they were interested in this occupation and they decide to leave is not necessarily a problem. What's a problem is not fully understanding it. So 6.6%, 3.3 of which is 0 to 5 years. So it's that 0 to 5 years that we want to look at. But we were talking just a minute ago about other occupations, right? So it may come as a surprise to many of us in the room that the normal turnover rate average for organisations in the UK is 34%. We're at 6%. 34%. You've got some businesses that are looking at a 50% per year turnover rate. That's every other person changing. 3 in 10 UK employees leave to join another organisation each year. So if you look at a similar profession, paramedics, that's around 10% turnover a year. In their survey data, they've got high numbers, something like 1 in 4, who are actively saying, I will leave if I can find something else to go to. This intention to quit sentiment that we pick up in surveys, which is quite high in policing. But people don't leave at that rate, obviously, and they're not leaving at that rate yet in policing. The point I wanted to make here is that when we look at our current leaver rate, so this is accepted fact. The blue bands, we're starting at April 20 up to April 2022. We're looking at that blue band is the 0 to 5 years, right? So that's the area that we are concerned about at the moment. What's going on with them? Why is that 0 to 5 years group of people leaving within their first 5 years more than other groups, which have stayed pretty consistent over the years, right? And we need to understand that in more depth. So we've got Dave Bruce here today, who leads on Operation Hampshire for us, the assaults strategy for policing, which all forces take part in and is required as part of PEEL, the 7-point plan. And we don't do as well as we should in terms of data collection, and we need to fix that. But in terms of the data we do get in at a national level, 80% of severe and serious assaults occur to officers within their first 5 years of service. 80% of severe and serious, this isn't just bumps and bruises, this is serious stuff, happening in 0 to 5 years. Now, you could say, well, they're all on response. That's where the rough and tumble work is, right? That's where you're going to get assaulted. But there's a high percentage of those assaults that also happen in our custody suites. The point I'm making here is that the data from Operation Hampshire is highly relevant, potentially, to why we have a high turnover rate 0 to 5 years. If you are getting severely and seriously assaulted, and you don't feel as though you're getting the right support from an organisation, and you're not getting support from the criminal justice system, which is a massive gap incidentally, then that is going to be one factor that we should consider. And unless we get really sophisticated about understanding, if we can't understand the data and get the insights from it, and then action those insights into improved training and support for individuals, then we're never going to fix one of the things that is actually fixable, which is reducing assaults and severe and serious assaults on our staff. And we're starting to make some headway on that, but we've got a long way to go. So when you hear about Operation Hampshire, it's not just about the wraparound for the individual, it's about actually getting the data, getting insights from it, and trying to find ways to actually reduce them. And I would say that in terms of 0 to 5 years, do we actually know how many of those people that are stating intention to quit or actually leaving have been severely or seriously injured whilst carrying out their duties? And what impact has that had on them? Because it's a traumatising experience at the best of times, isn't it? The other thing that we've been looking at with new recruits in this period of their career is we've been working with Liverpool John Moores University and Merseyside Police. Anybody here from Merseyside Police? Yep. So we've been putting wearable technology, haven't we, on lots of people actually, and there's lots going on across policing with that now. There's 27 forces involved. But one interesting thing we did with Merseyside was we said we'll go into the brand new recruits and we'll put wearable technology on them, and we're interested in their sleep, fatigue and recovery. Right? So how many people in this room had a really good night's sleep last night and woke up this morning fully refreshed? Everybody laughs when I do that at the Supers conference, right? Sleep is something that everybody sort of thinks, oh, it could be a lot better, right? It could be a lot better, and actually it's a fairly acute issue in policing. You've got shift workers, you've got people. Hands up who goes on call rotas in this room. Should be everybody, right, nearly, yeah. Some people are on 2 or 3 different on-call rotas. It's not good for your sleep, is it? You know, you jump up in the middle of the night, deal with a firearms job or an authority, then you try and get back to sleep, yeah. So sleep and fatigue is quite a stigmatised issue. Fatigue risk management, the Federation quite rightly have done a big campaign around fatigue, and it's something that we've normalised. So what we wanted to do in Merseyside was put wearable technology on new recruits who haven't even deployed yet, fresh out the box, and track them and their experiences and their data as they went into operational policing. And it was a fascinating insight actually into just how little awareness a lot of them had about how to cope with working shifts. I think that's the big thing. It wasn't necessarily the difficulty of the work, it was how do I adjust my lifestyle to work shifts. So the data experts who were looking at the data, it was all anonymised and GDPR and everything. You couldn't see the individuals, but you could see the patterns and trends. They were saying, right, these, and they were generally young people, are either getting 14 hours sleep a night, because they still live with the mum and dad and you can sleep for 14 hours, or they're getting 3 hours sleep a night. But they're going out every weekend and they're absolutely hammering it. Because on biometric data and wearable technology, and many of you will be wearing this in the room, alcohol shows up really clearly. Yeah, so they're having a good time at the weekends. And they're about to go into shift work that says, right, at least 3 weekends out of 5, you are not going to be able to do that. And when we saw the key data points flipped in the opposite direction, literally 90 days into their shift work. So there's massive opportunities which Merseyside Police and John Moores have taken from that to educate new recruits about the coping strategies, the healthy strategies to deal with working shifts. And it's really spread across Merseyside Police, and we're doing a big study at the moment with a Chief Scientific Advisor grant as well on different people and different groups. But the point I'm making here is that make no bones about it, new recruits coming into policing, unless they've worked shifts before, are entering a very difficult environment. And actually, it's probably one of the most challenging roles in policing to put a new recruit into. You work in shifts, you're on response, yeah, and it's a difficult landing zone for new recruits. So the more that we can do to support them, the better. So we talk about onboarding because I think as a headline, what can we do about this? Onboarding is what many forces are really focusing on in that 0 to 2 years, 0 to 5 years to get ahead of the curve on this. When you look around, 4 in 10 new recruits report ignoring their personal life needs due to work strain and agree that tension and stress from work adversely affects the rest of their life, each significantly higher than in 2021. That's the Renew Recruits Onboarding Survey. So we know that work-life balance, sleep fatigue, stress, these things are being reported back to us. And the more that we can do to really focus in and support those people in a very structured way, and I've talked about a couple of things, sleep fatigue, assaults, the other one is trauma exposure, the better that we can do. And so we're looking at building a lot of this stuff into curriculum for new recruits. We're looking at supporting the forces that are involved in the work around sleep fatigue recovery to scale that up to all operational facing staff over the next 3 years, so that every operational facing member of staff, police officer or police staff, will get high quality education, coaching, peer support about sleep fatigue and recovery. And that could be a game changer for us because the evidence that we're getting from John Moores University is that it is a real opportunity to support people to help them with their work life. So I'll move into experience. One of the questions I wanted to ask here is that I want people to shout out a few years now that at what point in your service did you feel 100% confident that when you went to work you could deal with anything that was thrown your way? Any job that you do, come on, so somebody shout some years out to me. Pardon? 5? That's pretty good, yeah. 10? Yeah. 20? Yeah. Because especially if you're going through different jobs and different ranks and different roles, it's like, you know, it's the flow thing, isn't it? It's like when you first learn to drive a car, it's terrifying, and then eventually it becomes autopilot. But what we're finding is that, you know, this is another thing. When we look at the age profile of our new recruits, what we see is that a lot of them don't make it through and they go for employment elsewhere. And we've got to ask ourselves, understand 100% why that is. So if you look at the STAY project, it's about catching people before they walk out the door and trying to find out and reverse engineer what's gone on for you, why is it you're intending to leave, which is really good. What a lot of big organisations are doing is they're constantly monitoring sentiment of new recruits, new entrants through organisations, and they're looking at that data to red flag groups of people and locations where that sentiment is starting to dip and where people are starting to struggle so they can get ahead of the curve and put interventions in place. And that is something that we're really interested in doing with new recruits. You know, instead of waiting for them to have formed an opinion to leave and then doing something about it, which is far better than doing nothing, what we need to do is do what a lot of top organisations do and try and get ahead of that curve. So this is the picture of experience. 53,000 police officers, less than 5 years service, which is 35% of all police officers. Breaking it down further, 9,000, which is 6%, had less than 1 year of service, and 9.4% had 1 but less than 2. And the number of proportion of officers with less than 5 years service has increased from 14% to 35% since 2016. Now, we're not alone in this. We do a lot of work with other organisations and particularly internationally with other police forces. And Australian police forces are experiencing exactly the same issue. If you go into Canada, they're experiencing exactly the same issue. They're struggling to recruit, and what they've got is a far younger and less experienced workforce at the moment. Yeah. Point is, this is a direct result of us, and it's a good news story, isn't it, having officers put back into policing. I know that's caused huge challenges, but having an injection of that many officers over a short period of time has created an imbalance in terms of the experience and age profile of people in policing. All the more reason to get involved in understanding what's going on for those people so we can hold on to them and they can move forward into being 5, 10, 15, 20 years experienced people. Yeah. And so we're really interested in doing more ourselves in the Wellbeing Service to target specifically new recruits and their experience and provide forces with products and services that they can just use to help them improve that experience. So I'm going to talk a minute about legal and moral position. And this is important because we look across the world at what systems people have put in place, for example, to deal with fatigue and particularly trauma exposure. And everybody's moving in the same direction around those two issues. For the right reasons, morally, it is a good thing to do because it improves the health, maintains the health of the workforce, which directly affects performance. It affects standards on the street. It affects the service that we give to the public. We all know about compassion fatigue, moral injury, all those things. But also, you've got a duty of care as an employer. And in policing and other emergency services, the type of work that we do has a different angle on that completely. And so this is role risk assessments are done by your health and safety leads. Stress management standards are there with the health and safety executive. And one of the things that we do in policing and other police forces across the world do it is what we would call an annual checkup from the neck up. So the Superintendent Association have piloted this. I think about 280, 300 members of the Super Association did a psychological risk assessment, which is an online, what I'd call checkup from the neck up. We provide 6,000 of those a year to high-risk roles across policing, and we estimate there's currently about 50,000 done by forces across the country. Our direction of travel that we're advising is, based on the evidence that we've seen from current PRAs, what's happening internationally, and also where the duty of care position is going, is that every operational facing member of staff should get an annual psychological risk assessment. That isn't going to help in itself, but in terms of providing an opportunity for somebody to say they are struggling and to have a system in place to pick that up early, we usually have a 12% referral rate out of PRAs, is a non-negotiable position for us moving forward given the work that we do. And we're not the only blue light organisation across the world that's doing that. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which have got 16,000 staff, have put in place a system where that's actually an online psychological risk assessment meeting with a therapist for all their 16,000 staff for this very reason. And I think they got to 3,500. The cost is huge to do it online, face-to-face like that. And started to run out of people actually to do the risk assessment meetings. It's a huge number of people. If you look at it in our sector, just in England and Wales policing, you're talking about probably moving from 50,000 to 120 to 140,000 people. Now, as I said earlier, in the Wellbeing Service, what we do is we don't just like to present a problem. We are actively looking at how we can build a platform that forces can use to do those risk assessments. If we can do that, we will, and so that forces can use that, and it's far more cost effective to get those numbers up over the next 2 to 3 years. And we're doing lots of other things, like piloting a mental health crisis line at the moment in the northeastern region, some national stuff that's commissioned once that all forces can use, and you don't have to do everything 43 times. So night worker health assessments. How many people in the room realise that if you're an employer and you employ night workers, you are legally required to give them, offer them an annual health check? Yeah, even I didn't know that actually till a couple of years ago, and I'm an anorak on this stuff. It's not just us, it's people who employ night workers. We employ a lot of night workers, don't we? And that is something that we should be doing, but it can be inconsistently applied Obviously, we do it on new entry to the police service, and most of those people go into shift working. But whether or not we're catching up with those people as they move through the service is another matter. And we need to find ways of improving what we'd call fatigue risk management. And we've got lots of things coming down the pipeline from Oscar Kilo to support forces to do that, working with health and safety leads, staff associations, etc. And I think that's something we can get to in time with the right support. We just need to look at it differently. So I was interviewed the other week around the recent events around what was the welfare support like and all this sort of thing. And I mentioned fatigue. And a really good question came back from the person interviewing me, said, well, what would good look like in terms of how you'd manage fatigue in a range of critical incidents like the ones that we've had recently? And I said the starting point is to have a very clear picture in your organisation of where the fatigue hotspots are. Which roles, which people, who's struggling more than others, because some are struggling more than others. We've found this in the work that we've done with John Moores University and Merseyside Police and other forces. It's not always the people you think are struggling who are. Some are actually doing okay. In fact, they're doing really well. But other people aren't. So before you go into a major incident, if you know where those pressure points are, you can support those people in a more targeted way as they come out of the tail end of a crisis. And that, in a sense, is how you would operationalise fatigue risk management. So we've got quite a way to go on that, but we're picking up the baton and we're going to work with it. So deployability was something that was really focused on in sort of the back end of last year. Restricted adjusted recuperative absence. Now, I think this is a bigger issue than... so absence tends to remain quite static at 3% or so. Over the years, which is weird. But what happens is that these groupings tend to expand, and in some forces, these are heading towards 20% of the total operational strength. So by the time you add all these up, these different categories, you know, up to 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 officers, for example, are not doing the full duties that they are actually deployed to do, and that's what deployability is. So there's some real myths around some of this, because some is Equalities Act, some are reasonable adjustments, legitimate, some are self-generated, for example, people on misconduct. So there's something to unpick there and understand without leaping to conclusions that this is necessarily a bad thing. The only point I would make is that if we're going to have an honest picture of what's out there able to deploy, we need to get information on what's on the right-hand side of that screen. Whether it's legitimate, whether it's self-induced or not, we need to have an honest budget to say what's actually there. Because the people who are actually on those teams, it does us no good to try to convince them that actually everybody's there when they're not. And I'm being very provocative about that because I've seen it in my own organisation where people have said, no, you've got 22 people on that shift at Preston. Well, when I've been down there and spoke to everybody, the sergeant said they've got 14. Well, no, they're on the books there. Yeah, but they're not actually there. Right? They're held against those posts, but they're doing something else, or they're doing 80% or 60% of that job. Right? And that is the brutal honesty of complying with the law, but also managing some of these tricky issues through around restricted adjusted duties, etc. Yeah? And recuperative. So absence isn't always the big problem. So when, you know, that is the category of people who are having probably the most impact on operational capability. Expectations of the police productivity review, talking about how many police hours could be freed up, and they looked at deployability data as well. There's a conversation going on about the quality of that data and what it actually means. But internally, these are the things that we know about, don't we? And pay, DI, welfare, flexible working, fair treatment. We're doing loads of stuff around this. Claire's here today doing families and leaver stuff under the covenant because we're trying to create a more holistic approach to the support and manage the expectations of people in policing. But these things really matter. They come out of all the survey work that we do. There's a lot of research done now, not just in the UK, saying that these are the things that are driving stress, absence, leavers, in blue light services if they're not done right. And it's because the nature of the job's really difficult and the cup's already pretty full. So in policing, we have got to really ramp up on getting some of this stuff done. So if you're involved in any of this stuff, which is often tough, difficult, cultural work, it really matters, folks. So keep doing it. We've developed workforce prioritisation guidance, what good looks like. We've got Paul Fotheringham, who's previous, as many of you will know, previous president of the Super Association. He's offered to help us get that circulated around forces from October this year. And we're saying basically that is effectively APP. It's not got APP status, but it could well be at some point mandated in terms of that's what good looks like in terms of wellbeing in your organisation. We've done that in response to forces saying we really need to be clearer on this huge nebulous thing that is workforce wellbeing and define exactly what that is. And so that we're all working to the same game plan and the inspectorate know what we're working to as well, so that we're all judged by the same standard. And there'll be no surprise in there for forces of what's in there. It's a culmination of 10 years of work, and it's affordable, and there's lots of support going in from us to help people understand it. And it's going down pretty well with a lot of the stakeholders that we work with on the National Wellbeing Board as well. So finally, the covenant, whole system approach. We've got to get a lot more work done. So far, we have not had significant funding for the covenant. We need funding for the covenant if we're going to make it work, and we can deliver a lot of stuff for the police covenant once nationally and support forces to get it done in an affordable way. And a lot of that's going on already with the work that Claire's been doing around families and leavers, etc. And there's all sorts of stuff on there that we're working with stakeholders in the covenant world that are consistent with some of the themes that I've been putting up before. So I'm going to show a short montage now of 3 videos that we've commissioned. One is about a new recruit. This is just the trailers. One's a mid-service officer, and the newest one, is somebody preparing a family liaison officer as she prepares for transition out of policing. We do these videos, they go to thousands of staff in presentations and training sessions, and they're there to provoke debate and raise self-awareness about the sort of issues that happen. This is the unluckiest new recruit you'll ever find.
One of you! Get out my house!
I'll get out your house as soon as you put the knife down.
Come on then. Show us your warrant card.
Why did you join up?
I said I'd do it.
You don't need to worry, Alfie.
Stop there.
Why did you join up?
Want to see the bruising, eh? You can't look at it, can you?
Why did you want to become a police officer?
How are you getting on in response?
Let's go.
Work's going really well, I think. Yeah, I think I'm keeping on top of things. I mean, you see a lot of the same faces again and again, but you still love the buzz.
And home life?
Well, what do you think you're doing going out this time of night?
What do you think you're doing coming home at this time of night?
Ruby!
Good, yeah, all good.
You're an hour late.
You've got to sort this out, Jake.
Very good, Becky, where the heart is. And what else do you want me to do? Take a desk job? I can't even get this bloody printer to work.
Look, I'm sorry, is there a problem with my work?
Recognise the wall. This is not your house, man! Yes!
Jake? Jake?
Just want you to be happy, Dad.
Simeon? Have you got a minute, mate?
They say the measure of a person is the lives they've touched. And I know, for one, that you've touched many lives, including everyone here. Looking forward to retirement?
Yeah.
Counting down the days.
Well, not exactly, but, you know, looking forward to it.
Look at this stuff. I thought you were proud of what you achieved.
I am.
We're going to start lightening your caseload.
What?
You need to learn to switch off.
Can I see my mum's body?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to be with you every step.
Rupert! You saved my life.
So I'll wrap up now. I think I've gone a little bit over. Oh, I'm okay. All right, cool. So I might have time for questions, I don't know. That's the final video that's going out as part of our Levers work. The full film has got full wraparound from a trained trauma therapist. All the films have that sort of pulls back to certain scenes and talks through them for safe practice. So the whole film's about 25 minutes long, and it's going to be out there and free to use from Oskilo. If you want it, just get on our website and find out how to get hold of it. Thanks very much, everybody.